Welcome back to our channel. In 1991, the world was on the cusp of transformation. The Cold War was drawing to a close, and the Gulf War had made headlines across the globe. In the United States, while international events stirred the headlines, domestic life continued its steady rhythm. Tucked into this rhythm was the mundane act of coin production, humming along in the vast facilities of the Philadelphia and Denver mints. That year, the Jefferson Nickel, unchanged in design since 1938, saw another unremarkable production cycle. Or so it seemed. The obverse featured Thomas Jefferson's familiar profile, calm and stoic, his gaze fixed forward. The reverse still showed his Virginia home, Monticello, framed in symmetry and balance. Millions of these 5-cent pieces rolled off the mint presses, mostly ignored by collectors and forgotten by the general public. But among the common, something different slipped into circulation. Something subtle, strange, and silent. It wasn't immediately noticed. After all, who inspects every nickel in their change? But it would take just one sharp-eyed collector to change everything. In rural Ohio, a young woman named Meredith Lane was sorting through decades of inherited coins. Her grandfather had been a postal worker with a habit of stashing coins he found peculiar. Most of what she found was typical wheat pennies, a few silver dimes, and common state quarters. But at the bottom of a jar, she found a roll of 1991 nickels, still in a faded paper wrapper from a local bank. She broke the seal and started looking through them out of curiosity. One coin, she noticed, looked slightly off, not in color, but in shape. It felt thinner. The rim lacked the crisp edge she had come to expect. She flipped it over in her palm, noticing something almost imperceptible. The reverse design was pressed far too lightly, almost ghost-like. Monticello appeared sunken, barely visible. At first, she assumed it was just wear. But the coin was otherwise pristine. She didn't know much about coin errors, but she trusted her instinct. She contacted a small-time coin dealer in Columbus, who examined the piece under a microscope and shook his head slowly. "This isn't wear," he murmured. "It's a strike-through. And it looks like it was struck on the wrong planchet." The wrong planchet. That phrase would send ripples through the collecting world in the months to follow. Further analysis confirmed it. Meredith's 1991 Jefferson Nickel had been struck on a copper-plated zinc planchet meant for a 1-cent coin. That meant it was thinner, lighter, and produced with a metal composition not intended for nickels. The U.S. Mint had mistakenly fed a penny blank into the coining press for nickels, a rare but documented mishap. But what made this case extraordinary was how cleanly the error presented. The coin wasn't mangled or misaligned. It was eerily centered, with faint but full design impressions on both sides. The story broke first on a niche numismatic blog, then spread quickly across online forums. Collectors were fascinated. Strike-throughs and off-metal errors were known, but this particular coin from 1991, it hadn't been recorded in major error catalogs before. That fueled a frenzy. Soon, others began digging. Another example surfaced in Illinois. A 1991 nickel struck on a foreign planchet, likely intended for a coin produced in another country. That coin was smaller, grayer, and had weak detail. Experts speculated that in 1991, the mint may have experimented with leftover planchets from foreign contracts, or that blanks had been incorrectly fed during equipment maintenance. Each new discovery added complexity. One collector uncovered a 1991 nickel missing its clad layer entirely, leaving the coin with a copper core exposed, red-toned and unusual. Another found a partial color error from the same year, which gave the rim a bulging, uneven appearance. The year 1991, once seen as a quiet production run, was quickly becoming a magnet for obscure but fascinating mint errors. Collectors, dealers, and specialists poured through bank rolls, mint sets, and loose change. The U.S. Mint never released an official statement, but internal memos eventually surfaced suggesting a brief but problematic transition period in one of the press lines at the Denver Mint. Planchets meant for testing had been stored improperly, and a small batch made its way into general production. The resulting nickels weren't just oddities, they were mysteries. Each had its own quirks, its own fingerprint of mint mishap. And each one sparked debate. How many were out there? Were these isolated incidents or signs of a larger unnoticed batch? Over time, certified examples began appearing at auctions. Meredith's original coin was graded 58 Australian dollars by NGC, given the strike's strength and the coin's surprising lack of wear. It sold at public auction for $4,200, shattering expectations for a modern 5-cent piece. Other examples, with varying degrees of error severity, followed suit. A nickel struck on a foreign aluminum planchet fetched $2,900. Another, bearing a double strike visible on Jefferson's nose and collar, realized $3,100. But the most captivating twist came in 2023. A collector from Colorado submitted a coin to PCGS that had baffled local dealers. It appeared to be a 1991 nickel, but it weighed exactly 2.5 grams, identical to a penny. More intriguingly, it featured both obverse and reverse die misalignment, with a rotated reverse nearly 180 degrees. And beneath Jefferson's portrait, almost hidden in the metal grain, was a clear clash mark from another coin's reverse, a Monticello outline ghosting through Lincoln's neck. How that hybrid clash occurred remains a mystery. Some theorized that a misfed planchet from a previous set run became wedged, then struck by both a nickel and cent die in succession. PCGS confirmed it was a double denomination mint error, one of the rarest forms of strike mistake. That coin sold in a private sale for $9,700. What began as a forgotten year in nickel history had grown into a collector's treasure hunt. 1991 was no longer invisible, it was alive with potential. It made people look twice at their change, at what they once ignored. And the original coin? Meredith's, the copper-plated zinc 5-cent piece that started it all. It changed hands a few times over the years, eventually making its way into a private East Coast collection. But before it vanished from public view, it sold again, this time, with an updated market value that stunned even the most seasoned collectors. Final sale price, $12,400. In 1994, America found itself in a strange in-between, a year not yet defined by the internet boom, but no longer grounded in the analog past. The country was shifting. And while industries, politics, and culture evolved on the surface, something quieter was happening deep inside the United States Mint. The Jefferson Nickel, still bearing the stately profile of Thomas Jefferson on its obverse and the classic Monticello on its reverse, continued to be struck by the millions. The design had gone unchanged since 1938. By 1994, the coin had become so familiar, so expected, that few people gave it a second glance. It clinked into pockets and trays, fell between couch cushions, and vanished into vending machines. Just another 5-cent piece, but something had gone unnoticed during one of those production runs. A small deviation, subtle enough to pass undetected at first. But it didn't stay hidden forever. In the suburbs of Minneapolis, a hobbyist named Darren Colby was sifting through a large bag of loose change he had purchased from a local flea market. He wasn't a professional numismatist, just someone with a keen eye and a fascination for things that didn't quite fit. He had a habit of organizing his coins by date and mint mark, hoping to stumble upon a transitional error or rare variety. That's when he spotted it. A 1994 nickel that looked slightly off. The coin's edge didn't feel right. Its weight seemed light in his hand, and under a small desk lamp, the color appeared inconsistent, a strange blend of silver with faint reddish streaks near the rim. Curious, he reached for his scale. The coin weighed 3.1 grams, slightly under the standard 5.0 grams for a nickel. That alone piqued his interest. He flipped it between his fingers and noticed something even more unusual. The Monticello design on the reverse was misaligned, not just off-center, but rotated at nearly a 100-degree angle from the obverse. Jefferson's profile remained in place, but the building behind him now rested on a slant, like it had been pressed in a moment of confusion. Darren had never seen anything like it. He posted a photo on an online coin forum late that night. At first, the responses were skeptical. Some assumed it was postman damage, others dismissed it as machine doubling. But then a collector from Oregon messaged him privately, urging him to have it authenticated. A week later, Darren submitted the coin to PCGS. The result? A rare off-metal strike and rotated die error. The coin had been struck on a leftover foreign planchet, most likely from a batch intended for overseas contracts. Its smaller size and lighter weight confirmed it. But the rotated reverse added another layer of intrigue. It wasn't just a one-off mechanical error. It was a sequence of mistakes happening at once: wrong blank, misaligned dies, and a clean strike that somehow made it through quality control unnoticed. The news spread quickly. Error coin collectors, long used to minor double dies and clipped planchets, were drawn to this 1994 anomaly. Especially because, until that point, 1994 had never been associated with significant nickel errors. It was like a previously unknown chapter had been added to a familiar book. More examples began surfacing in the following months. A collector in Louisiana found a 1994 nickel struck entirely off-center, with Jefferson's face nearly pushed to the rim and Monticello cut in half. Another coin from Florida displayed a broad strike missing the collar that gives the coin its raised edge. The result was a nickel that looked stretched, flattened at the borders, but perfectly centered. And then came the ghost strike. A man in Arizona submitted a 1994 nickel that bore faint impressions of both a buffalo and Monticello. Experts believe it was struck on a recycled planchet that had previously been used for testing 2001 buffalo nickel dies. It shouldn't have been possible. The timelines didn't match, but there it was. A haunting overlay of two eras fused in one coin. The numismatic world debated it endlessly, and though some called it coincidence, others saw it as a glimpse into the immense behind-the-scenes complexity. By 1996, these errors began appearing in auction catalogs. The rotated die error, like Darren's, was first to go up for public sale. Graded MS62, it hammered for $3,100. The off-center variant sold shortly after for $2,450. The broad strike reached $1,800. And the ghost strike? That one, though heavily debated, brought in $4,700 from a private collector who believed in its story. What fascinated people wasn't just the monetary value. It was the mystery. How could these kinds of errors happen in an age when mint technology was so advanced? Why were multiple error types appearing in a single production year with no prior documentation? Speculation swirled. Some suggested there had been a temporary switch in equipment for an overseas contract that never made it to press. Others theorized a test run gone wrong that somehow entered general circulation unnoticed. Darren, for his part, never stopped searching. He started visiting coin shows with his now famous 1994 nickel in a glass case. People would gather around, comparing their own finds, trying to decipher patterns. Some speculated that a rogue batch of blanks had been accidentally loaded into a 1994 nickel run at the Denver Mint. But no one could say for sure. Years passed, but the legend of the 1994 error nickels only grew. Each one seemed to carry its own story, each discovery reigniting the questions that had started with one coin pulled from a flea market. In 2024, a new example was found. A 1994 nickel with a double die reverse, the steps of Monticello appearing as overlapping shadows under magnification. It was the first of its kind from that year. The coin was slabbed and certified within weeks, and collectors were once again reminded that even 3 decades later, the full story of 1994 nickels hadn't yet been told. And what about Darren's coin, the one that started it all? It changed hands a few times. First to a private collector in New York, then into a museum-grade collection in Virginia. But when it returned to the market in early 2025, the demand had grown. Collectors remembered its origin. They remembered the weight, the rotated Monticello, the mystery that opened a door into the unknown. It sold at auction for an astonishing $11, $800 for a 5-cent coin that was never meant to be anything. In 2018, amid the steady hum of machinery at the Philadelphia Mint, tens of millions of nickels were pressed into existence. Each bore the familiar profile of Thomas Jefferson, his gaze forever cast leftward, paired with the domed image of Monticello on the reverse. It was routine, mechanical, practiced to perfection, or so it was thought. That year, the Mint produced over 1.2 billion 5-cent pieces across its facilities. Nothing out of the ordinary was expected. After all, the design hadn't changed significantly since the Westward Journey series ended in 2006. The 2018 nickel, to most eyes, was just another coin in the endless flow of commerce. But beneath that surface of normalcy, something peculiar happened. Somewhere in a sea of precision, an anomaly slipped through. It was so minute at first, so seemingly insignificant, that for months, perhaps longer, no one noticed. It traveled like any other coin, jingling in pockets, slipping into cash registers, passed without a second glance. Until a late autumn afternoon in 2021, when a collector named Jeremy Roth thumbed through a pile of circulated change after an estate sale in rural Ohio. He wasn't searching for anything in particular, just a habit formed from years of numismatic curiosity. Yet when his eyes landed on a particular 2018 nickel, his fingers froze. It felt off. That was the first thing he noticed. Not wrong, not damaged, just off. Jeremy examined it more closely, rotating it beneath the muted kitchen light. At a glance, Jefferson's portrait appeared normal, but the edges of the coin bore subtle distortions. The rim seemed thinner on one side, the letters unusually cramped in places. On the reverse, Monticello looked oddly doubled, as if it had been printed in a blur. But it wasn't where. Jeremy had handled worn coins. This was different. The doubling wasn't random. It followed a pattern, sharp and pronounced along the base of the dome and the word Monticello. A chill crept over him. That night, he didn't sleep. He combed online forums, pored through coin error catalogs, and cross-referenced minting anomalies. What he suspected but dared not believe began to solidify. He had stumbled upon a dramatic die clash and doubling, a combination rarely seen on modern nickels. Some called it a ghost clash, where elements from the obverse appear faintly mirrored on the reverse due to a misalignment during the minting process. But this was far more defined than any ghost. There was no ambiguity here. Word of Jeremy's find spread cautiously. He contacted a numismatic expert he trusted, and soon the coin was on its way to a grading service, accompanied by a note typed with trembling hands. Days passed, then weeks, until one day a sealed envelope arrived, containing a plastic slab and a formal description. Jeremy's hands shook as he read the label. 2018 P. Jefferson Nickel. Dramatic die clash. Reverse design doubling. Mint error. Graded MS66. The number alone was enough to accelerate his pulse. Mint state 66, nearly pristine. And it was confirmed. Not a post-mint alteration, not damage. A legitimate, verifiable mint error. That night, Jeremy placed the coin on his desk and stared at it for hours, the weight of history pressing around him. But this story wasn't just about discovery. It was about evolution. When Jeremy first posted a photo to a collector's subreddit, the response was polite curiosity. "Interesting," one user replied. "Could be something." But a few eagle-eyed collectors saw the deeper implications. A coin like this wasn't just an anomaly, it was evidence of a rare slip in a modern minting process that had been tightened to near perfection over the decades. The U.S. Mint simply didn't let things like this happen anymore unless, of course, the conditions were just right. As the coin changed hands first to a private collector in Texas, then reappearing months later in a digital auction, the buzz grew. Each time it surfaced, its value crept higher. It began modestly, $400, then $950. By early 2023, the bidding had climbed to $3,200. Collectors debated fiercely online. Some argued it was a one-off clash, a product of brief die misalignment that wouldn't be repeated. Others suggested a small batch could exist, maybe dozens, maybe fewer lurking quietly in circulation, undiscovered. The mystery fueled its rise. And yet, something lingered beneath that surface. A question few dared to voice aloud. Because Jeremy's find had prompted a search, not just among collectors, but among numismatic researchers. They began digging into 2018 Mint records, analyzing coin batch reports, error logs, and metallurgical data. One archivist uncovered a quiet footnote buried in internal documentation from late spring of that year. A machine miscalibration report on press number 17, active from May 14th to May 16th. The note included a vague reference to die pressure abnormalities. During the night shift, that was the window. More coins must have been struck during that time. The anomaly was not an isolated phantom, it was part of a specific, traceable event. Collectors began referring to it as the May Clash, and a new frenzy emerged. People combed their coin jars, their bank rolls, their junk drawers. 2 more specimens emerged by mid-2024, both sharing the same characteristics. Reverse doubling, faint clash marks on Jefferson's collar and hairline, all traced to the Philadelphia Mint. But the twist? One of the newly discovered coins wasn't a nickel at all. It was a blank planchet struck in nickel dies. A 5-cent coin design pressed onto a 1-cent copper-plated zinc blank. That error shouldn't have existed. The machines that feed blank planchets into the presses are meticulously calibrated by denomination. How a said blank ended up beneath a nickel die was baffling and unprecedented in recent memory. Experts were divided. Some suspected cross-contamination during cleaning cycles. Others theorized a rogue batch of blanks intended for experimental testing. But none could explain it entirely. The copper-colored 2018 nickel became a sensation. At first glance, it looked like a penny. Only when viewed up close did its bizarre reality come into focus. Jefferson's image gleaming from a copper surface, Monticello stamped with ghostly doubling, and the unmistakable Mint mark confirming its origin. The coin shattered expectations at auction. Valuation experts refused to speculate, but bidders didn't hesitate. When the gavel fell, the price was recorded at $16,750, an astronomical figure for a coin minted so recently. Its buyer remained anonymous, though rumors suggested a private collector from the Netherlands with a known appetite for error coins had placed the winning bid. From that moment on, the 2018 nickel was no longer ordinary. Coin shows began featuring it as a centerpiece exhibit. Articles dubbed it the Copper Phantom. The original nickel Jeremy had discovered? Its value followed suit. An insurer appraised it at $11,000. Offers flooded in, but he held on to it, quietly aware that its worth had become as much symbolic as financial. It represented more than metal. It embodied the thrill of pursuit, the beauty of imperfection, and the unexpected turns buried within the most mundane objects. Collectors now speak of the 2018 error coins in whispers, not because of fear, but reverence. The belief that others may still be out there haunts the community. Bank tellers have begun noticing a new trend: people requesting boxes of nickels and bringing them back the next day, combed through and rewrapped. Children, coached by parents, examine their lunch money under bright desk lamps, and every so often, someone claims to have spotted another. Sometimes it's a false alarm, a bit of grease-filled dye or mechanical doubling that mimics the real thing. But other times there's a glimmer of possibility. A new photo posted in a forum, shared hesitantly, triggering a cascade of excited commentary and forensic-level scrutiny. The value of the 2018 error nickel isn't just in its rarity. It's in its mystery. No official mint statement has ever addressed the May Clash. Some believe internal policies prevent such acknowledgments unless the scale of the error warrants a recall. Others think the mint knows more than it lets on, carefully tracking each discovery without drawing further attention. After all, for a minting facility that prides itself on precision, the existence of such an error, especially across multiple denominations, poses uncomfortable questions. In the end, the coin story is still unfolding. collectors continue to search. New entries are logged. Auction houses monitor for the next appearance. And somewhere, in an unsuspecting pocket or forgotten cash drawer, another error might be waiting its copper glow or ghostly doubling quietly defying expectations, daring someone to notice.